Hello again. This is the second part of the video. In this part, we will continue working on the same scenario from the previous video. We stopped in the previous video at the step whereby we were able to successfully migrate the data from SharePoint list into Dataverse, get the tables automatically created and the data moved using Power Platform Dataflows. In this video, we will continue working on more steps to finalize this move. Basically, create the required columns to again establish the relationships between the tables. So if you remember, we had some one-to-many relationships, some many-to-many relationships that we need to reestablish. So we'll be creating some columns and also creating some Power Automate flows to facilitate setting the right values for the one-to-many relationship in the lookup column that we will create, and also using the relate row action to set up the many-to-many relationship. Now let's go ahead and create the department column in the travel requests table. So to do that, I just need to click on add column here, provide a name for it, and choose the data type. And in this case, the data type is actually lookup column. So pick lookup. Then for the related table, I'll be looking for the department table that was just created by the data flow. So I'll pick that up. I'm not going to change anything else. Click done, save table. Now we can see that Dataverse is saving the table for us. Usually this is much faster. Well, I guess it's taking a bit longer than usual. Okay, seems this is okay now. Now to handle the cost centers relationship, actually, the relationship with the cost centers table, we don't have to add a column here again because it's many-to-many, and so we are just going to have to add a relationship between the travel requests table and the cost centers table. Now, by creating this department column, automatically we have created a relationship between the travel requests column with the department column, basically a many-to-one relationship. To validate, I will click here on relationships, and you can see now there is a relationship between a travel requests and department, basically a many-to-one relationship. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a relationship of type many-to-many, so we can use that for the cost centers. So yeah, this is the relationship name, relationship table name. So this is the in-between table that Dataverse will create automatically. Okay, I will save now. Okay, so relationship of type many-to-many created, department column is ready. Now I will show you how I created two flows. One would work on, so let's go to data here so you understand what I am talking about. So the first flow will run against this table, look at the value stored in the department ID, and then set the values in the lookup column here. And this, of course, will automatically establish relationship between the records in this table and the associated record in the department table. So for each of the travel requests, it will be linked to the right department record, to the right department or right department record within the department's table. For cost centers, we'll use a different flow that will look again at the value stored here. And for each of the values here, you can see it's comma separated. For each of the values here, it will create relationship between this record and the cost center record. Of course, to be able to visualize this, we'll need to add a subgrid to form to be able to see that. So you know what, let's go ahead and do that. So let's do that before we start executing the flow. So I'll go to forms here, edit the main form. Now let's add more elements to the more fields so we can take a look at them. So we've got the title, we've got the owner. I will add connection string so we can validate what we are seeing in the subgrid later on. Department, department ID. Again, department will be like will be more of a drop down. This would be the string value again, just to validate the values to help us just make sure, you know, we have this we have done this correctly. Just add travel duration, travel start date, and travel end date. So those are basically the columns that represents a travel request. Going to go ahead up. Let's add the subgrid too. So in this case, just click here and click subgrid, and basic. So in terms of the table here, we're looking for the cost centers table. Basically this one. And in terms of, I need to check, of course, the show related records to make sure that it's only showing the related records. Again, pick the table again, and you can see that it had filtered the tables to only the tables that has a relationship, a many-to-many relationship with this table. So again, pick cost centers, active cost centers. This is what I'm looking for. Done. And you can see that it did add this subgrid to show the cost centers that are related to this travel request. Of course, we don't have any until we run the flow that I've mentioned several times so far. Until we run that flow, there would be no items showing here. So let's call this cost centers. Of course, you can, of course, change the way this looks, etc. But that's not the aim of this video, so I won't be covering that. So I'll just save and publish. Okay, perfect. So now if we go back to data and click, for example, on this record, click edit, you will see that it's showing the values for the fields that we have picked. Also, it's showing the department ID, the cost center, the comma delimited values. For department, it's empty, and that will be set by the flow. And the cost centers is also empty here. So yeah, let's save and close. Okay, now let's go ahead and start working with the Power Automate flows. So the first flow I have open here actually is a flow that I'm using to update the lookup field in the requests, travel requests table, basically the department lookup field. I try to parameterize this flow as much as I can. So you can just provide main table name, main table lookup column, lookup table name, and the lookup table ID column name. So basically, those four values will help the flow create set the value and create the right relationship. However, you'll find that in many areas I'm referencing those variables, in other areas I don't. I just got a little bit lazy. But yeah, I'll try and call that out so you're not confused. Now I'm just going to replace this number with number I picked here. So as a unique identifier for my table names. So I'm just going to pick this and just replace those numbers. So first thing, for travel requests table, I'm using so I'm updating this variable, the main table name here, for the main table lookup column. I'm also updating the value. So this one here will tell my flow to run which against which table, and in this case the travel requests table, and update which column, basically the department column. Now this is the name of the lookup table. This is the same because I mean it's referring to the ID column with the lookup table. We don't have to update anything here. Now, so first thing first, again, updating the four variables here. First thing I'm doing is I'm listing all rows in the main table. So I'm listing all rows in the travel requests table. Of course, if you intend to do this on stages, then probably it's good to add a status column so you don't have to run the flow over everything, but probably items that are not updated. So you have a status type of column or a flag to filter out records that you have already updated. In this case, we're going to update everything, so we don't have any filters here. So for each item inside this table, again, the travel requests table, this flow, go ahead and let me show you the very last step, and we can then walk back from there. Is going to go ahead and update the department column. So to update the department column, you would need to have the ID of the record in the department table. To do that, what we're doing here is that we're looking at the department ID column that is part of that currently, has the department ID as in SharePoint, comparing that to the ID column that we have also migrated and to Dataverse in the department table, and then selecting the ID column. But this ID column here is not the one that we've created in SharePoint. This is the one that Dataverse creates to hold the primary key for the departments table. Basically, this will provide uniqueness to the record that is in the department table. So again, we're just listing all rows, comparing those two values, and then selecting the Dataverse internal ID column. Basically, this will come back as a grid. Then, of course, we know this will return only one value, but to avoid this having to go through another for each, I'm just using here the first formula to select the first value coming back from here. So it won't create a for each automatically for me when I try and do the update arrow. However, of course, this is not necessary. This is just how I like to do it this time. I'm just going to update the expression here. So again, this expression is just, again, making sure to return the first result that is coming back from this action here. It's a good practice, of course, when you have expressions, some complicated ones, is to include them in the note. So when someone else is looking into this flow later on, they can understand what this is doing without having, to click on it, etc. Now, I am going to update the table name to the table name. Of course, I could have repurposed the variable here. Again, I told you that for some of this I was lazy, so just bear with me on this. So I'm just picking the table, the correct table name here. And in terms of row ID, this of course will need to be updated once we update the table name here. So let's do that. So this of course will look at the department table. Yeah, this is the one. Let's again pick this number here and reuse it. Replace it here. This is coming from the variable which we already updated. This is fine. It's just the same department ID name. That's fine. It's the exact same column name. We don't have to update anything here. Now let's go back to this one here and update the expression. So I'll just go ahead and copy this and update it with the right ID. Let's pick this. Okay, this looks fine to me. I'm going to copy this again and paste. Yeah, this looks all right to me. Okay, we've updated the table name, we've updated the column name that is coming from the apply to each here, updated the table name here, again column name here. Here I'm using the variables, so that's perfect. So hopefully this should run without issues now. Let's go ahead and test. Okay, it's just providing a warning about the list rows because we're not using filters. That's not really important now. Now we can see that the flow ran successfully. And now let's go to look at the data to see if everything is reflected correctly. And yeah, look here, we can see that the department value has been updated correctly. Now, this is the older value, which is the value we migrated from SharePoint, but now this is the proper lookup column containing the right the values that we are looking for. Now let's look at the other flow. So let's go back to more flows here and look at this one. Again, reusing the same variables. So for this flow here, actually it will help us create the many-to-many relationship between the travel requests table and the cost centers table. So let's replace these very quickly here. Now, with the magic of video editing, you can see that I went ahead and updated all values, but I'll just run through the flow very quickly to try and explain to you what's going on. So first action here is just listing all travel requests in the travel request table. And then for each, you can see there is an apply to each loop here, looking at each value in the travel requests table, getting the value of the cost center string, which includes a string of delimited value of cost center IDs, using the split function here to create an array of those IDs, and then looping through this array and getting the actual cost center record from the cost center table, and then using that record to actually go ahead and use the relate row action. So for each record in the travel requests list, I'm providing again the table name, the row ID, and the relationship, and finally the OData ID, which is coming back from this step here. Of course, each one of these or the outcome from each from this list rows action here is actually one record. I could have used a compose action here and use the first function to return one value and then avoid this apply to each. But again, I was just being lazy, so you can see it here. Doing an apply to each was actually just running one loop. So let's go ahead and run this flow now. So the outcome should be, again, the flow will go ahead and update all the records in the travel requests list, basically creating relationships between the records in the travel request list with the cost center list based on the values stored in the comma delimited column in the travel requests table. So now I'm going to go back here, and of course we can't see the relationship here. Sorry, the outcome of the relate value of the relate rows here. However, or relate records, but we can look. We've added a subgrid previously to be able to see this. So for this one here, trip to Dubai, see there's two cost centers. Let's click on edit, and yeah, you can see now that we have two cost center associated with this travel request. So to sum up very quickly, we have seen in this video how easy it is to create a data flow to move your data from SharePoint to Dataverse. The data flow will help you recreate your schema over. You can do transformations within the data flow itself to handle values like multi lookup columns that allows multi-select, and also to do some data type transformations if you want to. Once the data arrives into Dataverse, you can then go ahead and reuse some of the flows that I have shown here to basically set the values for the lookup columns of single value, and then use the other flow to relate records in the travel requests table with records in the cost centers table. I hope this was helpful, and yeah, any questions, please leave in the comments below. Happy to help.